Sure. I'm Mark Richardson, PhD in biology. My company is Risslogic Scientific, though I've worked for Health Canada, amongst other companies and departments. Okay, back in, it would be late 2009, early 2010, I got a call from a person at the US FDA who was in the midst of trying to assemble materials and information and panel members and this sort of thing to do reevaluation of dental amalgam. And all of that work culminated in the hearings they conducted in December of 2010. But at the time he contacted me, first he was inquiring as to whether or not I might be available to be hired as kind of an ex officio employee of the FDA to act as a kind of an advisor and to aid them in the work. But of course, I don't have a US green card, and being a Canadian citizen, it was impossible to set that up. But we talked about the fact that there was this need for, if the panel the FDA was convening wanted to have a proper picture of exposures and potential risks, they needed a risk assessment done for the US population, specific to the US population, that could try and quantify the total numbers of people in the US population that might exceed the dose that's, for all intents and purposes, that we would call the safe dose. You know, defined by the US Environmental Protection Agency or another agency. And he was very interested in that. So I sent him a proposal. I said, and it was going to be, I think it was $116,000 to be able to put all the information together. It's not a small undertaking. I had a team of 6 helping me on different aspects of the work. You needed a team of 6 because they needed it done in just a few months as opposed to allowing you a whole year to kind of compose the information. So we had this team, we put the proposal to them and say, Mark, it's a great proposal, but we can't fund it without posting it on an open bidding system so that US-based contractors could bid on the same project. And since I had written the proposal, it was my copyright more or less, and I said, no, you're not going to post that. Because certainly anybody could just walk in and say, yeah, we'll do it for $115,000. And you know, I would lose rights to the study, I would lose rights to the proposal and this sort of thing. So he said, well, if we can't post it for competitive bid, he says their hands were tied. And I understand that. I work in government agencies. They're looking to get the best value for their dollar, so they like to go for a competitive bid. He says, since we can't go a competitive bid process, the best I can do is if you can get the study done and you can deliver it by the 14th of November, this was in 2010, it will be part of the package that goes to the FDA panel members for review in preparation for the hearings that were going to be conducted in mid-December. So I was quite fortunate with the assistance of the International Academy of Oral Medicine and Toxicology. We found some, well, I guess I always like to call them wealthy benefactors or whatever, who were willing to step forward and put some money up to fund the study. So we got that done, did that assessment of exposure to mercury vapor from amalgam fillings in the U.S. population. It's the first one of its kind that was done. And then that was published in the journal Science of the Total Environment. We published it in the scientific literature the following year. It takes a little while for the publication process to occur. So they go through peer review and everything. So it was into 2011 when that got published. Well, findings on that. Basically, roughly 60 million U.S. citizens who have amalgam fillings will exceed the safe dose that would be defined by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. But if you rely on the California Environmental Protection Agency for their perspective on the dose or exposure to mercury vapor that might be considered safe, you have about 110 million Americans who exceed the California safe exposure level. So that's pretty significant. We have a population of around 300 or 330 million in the U.S. You're looking at a good third of that population that is known to have amalgam fillings and will exceed what the federal government might consider to be a safe or acceptable exposure level. And, you know, that in and of itself is pretty significant. And then, of course, the more fillings a person has, the more they exceed the safe limit. So you could have four or five amalgam-filled surfaces and be okay. You just sort of meet the exposure, that safe exposure level. But if you go beyond that, of course, you would start to exceed exposure. And a person who has a mouthful of fillings, and there are people in the database who have, well, they measure exposure, they measure the number of restored teeth in terms of surfaces. And you think a molar tooth has a top and four sides, so it's a five-sided tooth. So you could have five surfaces filled on that individual tooth. Well, there were people who had more than 100 surfaces in their mouth. So that's at least 20 teeth, you know, probably more. They have a mouthful of amalgam, and that, you know, it's known to occur. You know, people who have very bad oral hygiene or other problems with their teeth, well, they get fillings or they get total crowns or whatever it is, and a lot of that is mercury mercury amalgam. So you can have quite the dose of mercury from a mouthful of amalgam fillings.